Alright guys, welcome back. GM Light here. I just got back from seeing Blue Beetle, and this is going to be more of a casual video. I'm not going to be very cognizant of spoilers, so exit if you are worried about that. And based off the box office, probably going to be a lot of people. So if you don't care, whatever. But just kind of diving into it, I went in, didn't have very high expectations. I've heard some people say that it was pretty decent or good. I was sure that I would probably at the very least like it. I'm a huge DC fan, and although this movie didn't seem like it was really appealing to the parts of DC that I really like, which I like either the dark stuff or the pretty large scale epic stuff. And since this movie kind of seemed like it was fitting in that Marvel-esque type feel, I didn't think that I would enjoy it all too much. But I thought, hey, maybe I'd get a kick out of it. And I did. I really loved that whole Blue Beetle battalion movement that was online. I thought that stuff was fucking hilarious, and I was all over that stuff from day one. This movie feels very much like an underdog. It made me want to go out and support it more. I wanted to support DC because I don't like to see the brand flopping the way that it does. It really is kind of upsetting to see so many DC movies be flopping. There's so much viability outside of Batman and Superman, and I just hope that they get things right going forward, and I really hope that they don't make the same mistakes or try to go in a jokey direction, even though this movie is kind of jokey. But what I'll say though is that this movie, something that I think separates it from a lot of other superhero movies that are coming out, especially some of the newer Marvel movies, is that it feels like they actually put some heart and soul into making this movie. It doesn't feel like it was just an AI generated fucking script and low effort. They just kind of threw together this formulaic superhero movie, although it kind of does feel a little formulaic. What I'll say is that there is more heart and soul to it than there has been with a lot of other movies, and what I think that comes through in is the best part of the movie is the characters, especially Jaime Reyes. I think that Zolo Maridueña does a really good job with this character, and it made me want to see him more and hope that he does stick around for the future of the DCU, but I don't believe anything James Gunn says nowadays. I feel like he's tried to protect every movie that's kind of been left hanging since he announced this reboot. So now it just kind of feels like he's teasing everybody at this point and insinuating that it might be going somewhere, because he knows that if he says the Flash is going nowhere, Shazam's going nowhere, Blue Beetle's going nowhere, Aquaman's going nowhere, he knows that it's a dead end. It's going to instantly turn a lot of people off, and then they're not going to go see it. And with Blue Beetle, I will say it doesn't really show that it fits into any continuity in particular. So I think there is a good chance that they could just write him to be in the new DCU. That's what I think is so confusing about the statement that he made, saying that Blue Beetle's the first DCU character, but Superman Legacy's the first DCU movie. Does that mean that this movie isn't canon, but the character is? Why wouldn't you just keep it canon? Why wouldn't it just... Whatever. The whole thing is just so botched. Anyone who tells you otherwise, it's just because they're shilling for James Gunn, which I think he's a great director, and I'm sure that he will deliver something special with Superman Legacy. I want to give it a chance, and I don't want to write it off immediately, but the way that this whole rollouts happen has been just so fucked up and convoluted, and it totally killed the 4 last movies just dead on arrival. Going back to the movie itself though, like I said, it's the character of Blue Beetle that I think is the unique part about it. It's what made me like this movie and attached to the story. Because what I'll say is that a lot of these story beats, they're very derivative. There's a lot reminiscent of other superhero movies. It actually reminded me a whole lot of Venom, which a lot of people were comparing it to Iron Man or Spider-Man stuff. Venom's the one that I think was most like this movie, because he got stuck with this symbiote where he's involuntarily fighting people and getting in these situations. He can't control his body, and he's talking to someone inside his head that is controlling him. It's very Upgrade / Venom-ish. So that's what I'm saying is the action, it can be cool. I get a little bit numb at this point to CGI fights and battles and stuff, just 2 CGI things beating each other up. So the fact that Zolo's character is so likable and compelling, it's what I stick around for in this movie, because let's face it, it's not CGI fighting, it's not the plot. It's all just been there, done that. You kind of need something more than that. It's also the family aspect. They do emphasize the Mexican culture a lot in this movie, and it's good because it doesn't feel like they're just doing forced diversity for the sake of it. It feels like they actually put time and effort into getting it right. Family's also pretty likable. Whenever the family's in danger, that is where you feel the most, I'd say, throughout the movie. You do feel afraid when his family's in danger. You want him to save them and save the day. It's when the movie feels the most desperate. And George Lopez, my buddy came out of the movie saying that he's the best and worst part of the movie because he has a lot of jokes that hit and they hit hard, but he also has kind of a lot of flops. So it's just kind of a hit or miss thing. It really depends on your sense of humor. At this point, humor in superhero movies, I've just become a tough audience because I feel like whenever there's a dramatic scene, a lot of superhero movies will undercut the drama by putting in a very stupid, low-hanging fruit joke. It's a gripe that a lot of people have nowadays. It's just hard to be invested and take the movie seriously when the movie doesn't even take itself seriously. There's a few times where the family's joking and they're doing weird gags, weird situations where I feel like you'd be genuinely more concerned for your son or your family member, but it's a little bit more forgivable because it doesn't feel like Marvel humor. It just feels like sometimes they let a gag run on too long. I'd probably enjoy it a little bit more if it was a little bit shorter. It's about 2 hours, the standard runtime for most comic book movies. I think that this could have fit in an hour and a half, hour 45 minute long type deal. I'm not exactly sure what I would cut because, off the top of my head, I don't think like anything was too superfluous. It's just that if it had a tighter pace, moved quicker, and I was out in an hour and a half, I probably would have left a little bit more enjoying things. Some of that stuff being cut out, it could have been maybe some of the CGI stuff. I get numb to it to a certain degree. And then also it's just pointless in even giving the villains any kind of depth because they have no depth. The villains are as stock evil as you could possibly imagine. They try to give one of them a sympathetic backstory in the end, but it really is just too little too late. He feels like a generic tested on soldier. Nobody really cares. I didn't care. It felt like it was a little bit at the end kind of just a bit of a cheap match of the Scarab telling him his backstory and you getting these flashbacks to him having a hard life. It feels like a cheap way of trying to get you to actually care about this villain and feel like he has more depth than he does, but he really is just kind of an asshole until the end of the movie. And then he drags the egotistical fucking evil aunt of the movie into the fire and they blow up. It's a little bit nuts. Kind of weird too that Blue Beetle made such a big point of not killing him, but then he was just perfectly fine to let him drag her into the fire and blow himself up. Just no effort to stop him at all. I thought that was a little weird. I would understand more if he didn't know until it was too late, but it felt like he kind of knew and he just made no effort to stop him. The whole movie just feels like a series of kind of varying quality. Some of it's very good, some of it just doesn't work at all, especially with the CGI. I really like the way that Blue Beetle looked when he had his helmet off because you could tell that is when he was fully practical and Zolo was in an actual suit. The suit was looking really good, but then as soon as the helmet comes on, he goes full CGI, man, and then it looks a little bit less convincing. And I'm tired of that because I do like seeing these tangible suits and costume set designs. All that stuff gives you more of a physical presence to latch onto when you're watching these movies. So when that happens, way more preferential. That's also, too, what I think is just kind of insufferable about the villain, is he's just a totally generic CGI robot monster by the end of the movie. And it makes it feel like there's no tangible villain to fight. You don't really feel any kind of presence or threat. Your eyes really trained to look for things like this. And I know that sounds kind of dumb coming from the same guy who put The Flash as a top tier movie, but even with The Flash, I don't think that the CGI was terrible in the scenes where it would have taken me too much out of the movie, because when the CGI was at its worst was going into the Speed Force and the running and stuff, and yeah, it looks stupid, but the story I thought was so good that it kind of surpassed my problems with the CGI. With this, when they're hinging a big set piece around the CGI and the CGI doesn't work, that's when it becomes a bit more of a problem. But around it, the family dynamics, Zolo, all that stuff, that's the stuff that works the best out of the movie, what makes it stand out more than other comic book movies that have been coming out, because there's more of an effort to give heart and a family theme and a likability to the Blue Beetle. So would I rush out to see it? No, not really or anything, but still, I would definitely catch it on home release. It's worth it. It's an enjoyable enough movie. Maybe not pay $15 to go out and see it in theaters, but it's perfectly fine. Sometimes a McDonald's cheeseburger really does hit home. This was a McDonald's cheeseburger. It's the same shit, I know it, but it's still good sometimes, and and this one, it was alright. I liked it. So let me know what you guys think of Blue Beetle in the comment section. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Why do you think the Blue Beetle Battalion was not able to save the box office of this movie? I'd love to hear. I'm GM Light. Have a good one.